Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. General, thanks for coming on the show.
Always good to be here. Thank you.
It's been a while, and it's good to have you back on. Lots of topics to talk about, but I want to start with crime. It's kind of a scary topic, and we've seen some crime here in the capital city. We've seen it in other cities across the state and across the country. You're part of this task force that was recently created to really crack down on violent crime here in the capital city. Can you talk about that? What went into the formation of this task force, and what are y'all doing?
Yeah, first of all, remarkably proud of the work of the men and women that are a part of this group. I mean, they are not generally assigned to this duty, but they've had already tremendous success. I mean, 280 plus outstanding warrants served, including people that were out on capital murder charges, attempted murder charges. We've seen fentanyl taken off the street, countless illegal guns that have been seized, as well as other arrests. And so really proud of the work that's done. And I'm hearing tangible results from people that talk about in certain parts of Montgomery that they now feel safe going out on their front porch, or we had cookies delivered to our office as a result of the work that's been done. But huge kudos to Hal Taylor and the group at Aaliyah, because this was their desire, after we've heard from so many about what can we do to be able to assist in Montgomery, to come up with this concept of not only the partnering with our office, with the Sheriff's Department, and then members of the Gang Task Force at the Montgomery PD, but what we could do to make a difference in the capital city. Because, look, what goes on in Montgomery is bigger than Montgomery. Sure. I mean, this is the capital of Alabama. What we know is being reported here is applying to Alabama in the minds of many outside of our state, and maybe similar to what took place in Mississippi around Jackson for a while is some of the narrative that's taking place in Montgomery. But I can tell you that there are some remarkable law enforcement officers dedicated to that mission that are doing good things. But Hal Taylor and Sheriff Cunningham here in Montgomery deserve remarkable credit for the work they're doing, and really proud of the folks from the AG's office that are likewise a part.
Mm-hmm. So I, saw Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed the other day said, look, crime is actually down. He says it's down 12, 13%. I guess that's violent shootings or whatever. So is it more vibes? Are we just, are you seeing different information or anything, or is he off?
Well, I can't speak to the data that the mayor is talking about. I can tell you that crime data is not always real time. But the one thing that I think gets lost a little bit in the equation is sometimes we look at, say, for example, homicide rates. And I don't think that's necessarily a great statistic, because one thing when you look at the researchers, they'll tell you is that because medicine's better, we're saving more people.
Yeah.
And so part of that needs to be how many individuals have been shot, how many have lost their lives, but also what shootings are taking place. I mean, we remember the story of the party that was in Montgomery with, what I hear, 1,000 people and 200 and something shell casings there.
Yeah.
By the grace of God, we didn't lose anybody. Does that mean there wasn't a significant event there that we should be concerned about? Absolutely it was. It may not show up in the data. And I think sometimes perception is reality. And there are people in Montgomery that said, I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And that was where the state responded. And again, very pleased with what we've been able to do here, because what feedback I get, and it's more important what I hear through people stopping me at the grocery store, because I live here. This is my home. And people that send us constituent mail, it has been very positive about the work that's been done, because here's the reality. Montgomery Police Department is down significant numbers, which means that they don't have the ability to do the things that historically that we've done. We see the same thing going on in Birmingham, where numbers are at historic low levels compared to where they've been just
numbers
in the
of
last
officers.
decade. Yes.
Yeah.
And when the tide recedes, it allows for the bad guys to do bad things. And so I think what this effort has done is really be able to put law enforcement in places where we haven't been, or with numbers that we haven't had before. And one of the more gratifying things for me is when I have a Montgomery police officer come up to me and say, I had backup last night, and I hadn't had backup in a while. That means that we're doing the right thing, not only for the community, but also to be able to support local law enforcement here in Montgomery, because that's really what this is about.
Yeah, it probably gives them a lot more confidence to go into those areas that they have to, those dangerous areas. Well, look, we've got a legislative session coming up in February. It'll be here before you know it. And I keep hearing that this issue, crime, is going to be a big one in terms of, let's get to the root of these things. Let's try to pass some policies that might help the situation. The one thing that I keep hearing comes back to this Glock switch ban that kind of turns a handgun into a spray, machine gun type thing. Have you been approached by anybody about legislation? Is your office considering any legislation related to crime as it approaches this next session?
Yeah, definitely having conversations with individuals who have not been approached about the Glock switch issue. But one thing that we're trying to remind local law enforcement about is the bill that we were able to get passed in the most recent session dealing with gang activity in communities. Mm-hmm. That bill includes an enhancement of penalties for somebody that's connected to a gang, committing that gang offense, and they do it with a handgun that has a Glock switch. We're able to elevate the punishment there. And so one thing that we've gone around the state and done is to be able to help train local law enforcement. Candidly, I think we got to do more at the local level to be able to use that tool that's available to us. But we've already seen the legislature be able to embrace an opportunity for us to try to send a message of deterrence to those that want to be able to use these devices. But yet we remain open to be able to talk about what other things can be done. Sadly, for too many years while I've been AG, seemingly we've been on the defensive, where I think that we've pushed back from things that have made good, solid public safety decisions in the last several years. And so I think we'll be glad to be aggressive. The other thing is we need to be able to talk about what it means to be a law enforcement professional and why we need to be able to recruit young people into the profession. For so long, we've had a negative narrative around law enforcement. At least some bad apples have tainted the entire profession as a whole. And I can tell you they're my heroes because every day I see what they do. One of the things that has nothing to do with legislation is what is it that we can do to enhance the ability for places like Montgomery, for Birmingham, and other cities and counties around the state that are short officers. How do we bring people back into that profession? And I hope that'll be part of the discussion that we have.
Yeah, that's really interesting because when you talk down the profession, it's going to result in down the road and reduced numbers. Let's switch gears and talk about some litigation. The transgender ban has been once again allowed to proceed as it awaits that trial. When is that trial going to happen? Will it happen, and when might we see that evidence?
Yeah, right now the case has stayed because Judge Burke has decided, based on the fact that the United States Supreme Court is taking a case out of Tennessee that adopted a similar law to Alabama, wants to see what legal standard emerges from the court. And I'm very proud of the fact that Alabama has led that effort across the country in talking about what is the appropriate legal review of a state trying to protect its kids from being part of a failed European experiment. And really do want to give kudos to our Secretary of State, who during his tenure, Wes Allen, led that charge for Alabama. And I think we were one of the first 3 states to pass that ban. And the one thing that this litigation has done for us, and maybe the Department of Justice now greatly regrets intervening because it opened the doors of discovery for us to them, is that we've now been able to see the interplay between government officials, Rachel Levine being one of those, Admiral Levine, with medical community as well as these advocacy groups that are influencing the development of standards of care to meet their philosophy and not what's best for kids. And I think what you've seen as a result of the summary judgment motion that we filed has been picked up nationally in the conspiracy that we've revealed among those parties to the detriment of kids. I mean, when you've got one of the highest ranking medical professionals in this country, and Admiral Levine, calling a medical group to say, remove age restrictions on surgeries on kids because you're hurting our efforts to help transgender people, that's wrong. And we've exposed that, and I think Judge Burke is not going to take a very favorable look at, number one, how this was proposed to him to begin with. Because at the early stages, you heard the federal government say, oh, this is the standard of care universally accepted around the world. Well, what we've revealed is that's not at all the case. We've seen, and you and I have talked about the Cass report that came out, comprehensive review over 4 years out of Britain, which has absolutely exposed the lie that's been going on for years. I'm proud of where Alabama has led that effort nationally, and we'll continue to be involved with it at the Supreme Court.
Relatedly, Title IX, this was a directive from the White House, from, I guess, the Department of Education, changing the rules about a very important part of law that was designed to increase women's participation in sports at the high school level. You've been involved in that. Where are we in Title IX discussion?
Yeah, and by the way, one of the most bipartisan and successful pieces of legislation we've ever seen, going back to the early 70s, saying let's give women equal educational opportunities as well as access to sports. We've seen the results of that, and this administration wants to destroy it all. We've seen multiple states, red states, come together through litigation across the country. In all of those cases now, we've been able to obtain a stay of the rule that was going to be effective August 1 that would have impacted Alabama's law that says male bathrooms are for males and female bathrooms are for females. We say that boys are not going to compete against girls in sports, would have jeopardized our ability to be able to enforce that law. I'm very pleased about the success not only we obtained for Alabama, but also what we've seen around the country. And the other interesting thing about that litigation is it's for the first time we've seen conservative nonprofits group also engage and get relief for their members as well. Moms for Liberty is a group that many have heard about. And not only did Moms for Liberty obtain relief for what have been chapters in Alabama, but also in blue states that chose not to be able to challenge the rule. And so I think it's a very interesting sort of piece of litigation, but right now, consistent with the wins that we've been able to get around gender affirming care, we're getting that same victory as it involves the changes they're trying to do to Title IX.
Well, we'll follow both of those cases as they work through the courts. I wasn't able to ask you last time because it was still pretty early in the investigation, but your office was the subject of a attempted bombing. Get kind of a makeshift bomb. Like I said, last time you couldn't really talk about it, but there is a suspect. I guess is in custody. I'm not sure where the process is, but can you talk about that situation now that it's a little more time has passed and this person and maybe what we now know about them and why they did what they did?
Yeah, first, great deal of gratitude to federal, state, and local partners who were able to solve this case because it was not easy. You had the individual that now has pled guilty federally. Still doesn't mean that state charges wouldn't be forthcoming. Decided that he wanted to push back against the governmental institution, which is the Attorney General's office. We have him on camera walking around the city of Montgomery with Antifa signs, social media talking about his outrage against conservatives, against individuals that profess their faith, very anti-government with his rhetoric.
So it seems political, not random.
I don't think it's random at all. He knew exactly where he came to as far as the city of Montgomery. He was in and around all of the Capitol buildings themselves. I think more will come to light about maybe what his intentions are that I don't need to speak about at the moment. But yet, for the people that work in my building, and I have a remarkable group of individuals that are dedicated to helping the people of Alabama, and this was a direct attack against them. And to the extent that we're able to solve it, understand that we do not believe that there are other actors involved, that he in fact was kind of the lone wolf idea, I think has given our folks a sense of relief, knowing that they don't have to be concerned about coming to work. But no doubt, he tried to send an absolutely contrary message. And to the extent he wanted to attack somebody that was conservative, that professes their faith very publicly, then I'm probably the guy that he comes after, and the institution that I represent he comes after. But the fact that law enforcement came together, I think, in a very fast and remarkable way allowed us to solve a case that was not the easiest to solve.
Political violence puts things in perspective. Obviously, we just saw an attempted assassination of the former and possibly future president. Just really shakes you up. So yeah, thoughts are with your staff and everybody. Well, look, while I've got you, I have to ask you the question on everybody's mind. 2026 is coming. You are often talked about as a possible candidate for governor. Might we see you on the ballot running for the top job in 2026?
Well, I've got to have a job in 2026.
Can't run for AG again, right?
Can't run for AG. And look, amazingly blessed to have almost 10 years under my belt at the time that's over. But I've got to figure out what I'm going to do, want to feel where I'm led and where I'm called, and maybe in a weird way where I'm most burdened to feel like I need to find my space. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be politics. Mm-hmm. I will be 60 this year, so life is not over. But I know that's a decision that my wife and I will have to make here soon. And I'll make sure that you're one of the first to be able to know.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to have a lot to say about 2026. It's going to be a huge election year because we've got, obviously, governor, all the constitutional officers, most of which are going to be open seats. You got the entire legislature, and also the U.S. Senate. We don't know, whether or not Senator Tuberville is going to run again. He hasn't announced. So a big, big year.
And the thing that, whether I run or not, the thing that I'm most excited about during that cycle is to hear the vision for the state of Alabama. What is it that someone believes that they can do to lead Alabama in those next steps? And I think that's what elections are about. When you no longer have an incumbent, there's nobody that's presumed to be the front runner, if you will. And so it becomes that opportunity to have a debate about ideas, about policy, and what matters to the people of our state. And I think that's where leadership is going to be shown, and that's going to give the people of Alabama an opportunity to make a choice.
Absolutely. I'll be the first to say it matters who is in that governor's office. It really does matter for the state. General, we're out of time, but thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.